Good evening. I'd like to call the school committee meeting to order. Before we go to our regular meeting at 7:30, we did call for a public hearing slash meeting for the discussion of the after-school program request for proposals that we have been working on. I want to allow anybody the opportunity to come up and speak who would like to do so. Today we are considering as a committee the request for proposal that's going to be sent out and released, welcoming bids and solicitations to partner with us to provide elementary school students creative, enriching, and innovative after-school program. Today is not a discussion on individual programs. I will certainly allow anybody to come and speak. However, I will not entertain any discussion about any particular provider. That'll be for a later time when presentations are made by people who put in to be an after-school provider. We will have public presentations by anybody who does put in as a provider, but today is not for discussion on those topics. That'll be at a later time. But I certainly want to welcome the opportunity for anybody to comment on suggestions or opinions on after-school programming, what they would like to see in terms of after-school programs, what type of curriculum, activities, things of that nature. We as a committee wanted to hear from the public, entertain different thoughts and suggestions, and then compile our RFP that's going to go out to the public. I want to mention that we did do a survey that went out to the elementary schools. We received over 630 responses. Many from each school. Each school had a significant number of responses, which was terrific. And I know we worked hard to try to get that out as best we could, putting out public messages and providing them to the schools. And it was great that we received such a response, over 630 responses. I wanted to thank the Parent Advisory Board. I know some members are here this evening for their help and their suggestions on the survey as a method to reach out to people who can sometimes have difficulty getting to public meetings. We wanted to try to provide them the ability to respond in an easy way to get the information to us so that we could take that all in as we deliberate the proper language for our RFP. So I wanted to thank the Parent Advisory Board. They played a big role in this survey, and I wanted to show my appreciation to them as well. I'm going to open it up to the school committee if there's any thoughts or comments that needed to be made now before I would offer it up for anybody in the audience today to come up and speak. Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know our usual public participation rules will cover this public hearing as well, with the traditional 3 minutes per person for people to give their name and address when they get up to speak. I don't know if any other members had anything else that they had wanted to bring up, but I know that those are things that we always talk about when we have public participation.
Thank you. Mr. Rosignol?
Thank you. Through the chair, first thing I'd like to say is thank you to Dr. Levine, to Ms. Murtagh, and to Dan Doucette for putting this RFP together. I know we've had a chance to peruse it. We gave our feedback. We also added a couple of things, took away a couple of things. But I just want to thank you guys for the time and the effort to create this RFP, and I appreciate it. So thank you.
Great. I know we've had the opportunity to review the survey. At least I know I have. I know many of you spent time on the survey as well, reading through the responses and the information provided, which was terrific. And I know we had discussed it at our last meeting, and all of us agreed that it was time to have a public hearing just to make sure if there's any additional suggestions or responses that we could factor that in before we go ahead and release it. We can make a vote on that later today, hold it to the next meeting. We do have to decide how much time we are going to give any potential bidder in terms of responding to the RFP, because certainly we want to stay on a schedule where we set up public meetings, public presentations to allow any provider the ability to come in, not only meet with us, but anybody else in the public that would like to come and be a part of that and watch as well. So we want to try to create a schedule that fits our timelines, as well as to make sure that we afford those providers that are interested the ability to prepare their presentations and to make sure that they're successful. As you know, we have contracted for the summer with FKO to provide the summer programming again, and this wouldn't be until the start of the school year, September 1st, the start of the school year. This would be for the new provider. So I want to open it up now. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to come up and speak on this? Please come forward. The microphone is open. Please come up. Welcome, and if you could just please state your name and address, please.
My name is Pamela Vecchio. I live at 17 Ellsworth Road. I do have a letter here for, if you guys would like to pass around, please. I'd appreciate that. Where do I begin? I guess, is that better? Where do I begin? Some people in this meeting do know me extensively. I've met with assistant superintendent and mayor and everybody. I know we're not supposed to talk about specific programming, but this is something that is absolutely 100% close to my heart, and I would appreciate if you just let me read the letter.
I just need to make sure I'm not going to be able to take any testimony about for Kids Only, the YMCA, any other provider.
Well,
that's not going to be discussed today.
Let me touch what's in addition to this letter in generalities. What has been provided to me in the program has been outside activities for me and my family, which I could not otherwise participate in. I have had participation in IEP meetings. They have extensively. I would encourage you to read this letter. I'm sorry that I cannot speak specifically to FKO, as they are 100% close to my heart. When you have a son with significant disabilities, and I've worked with the district to allow him, because at his home school, there is no opportunity for any after school because he needs one-on-one support. He cannot do the West Memorial play. He cannot do the Boy Scouts, as I am a single working mother, and there's nothing there for him to do, and that is the only school in the district where he gets support. And if it wasn't for me pushing the district itself, but with the collaboration of currently FKO, I do have to say it, Mayor, I'm sorry, of FKO, and how they're so involved in his IEP, so involved in the well-being of my family, so involved in the well-being of my son. He lives, dies, and breathes for this. The staff there work amazingly with children with all kinds of significant special needs, and I do not see, I work in special education myself. I'm an OT in a different district. I have all these kinds of kids, and I do not see in any way, shape, or form a change in programming will, number one, be completely detrimental to what my son's disability is. Secondly, I just don't see a YMCA or any other program working.
Please, Pam, I'm not going to be able to comment on other
I don't
providers.
see any other program being able to come to IEP meetings. I don't know what their model is. They would need to come to IEP meetings. They would need to speak to school committee. You know, they would need to provide, because the district will not provide any funding for my son to have one-on-one. That has been made clear. Currently, any program would have to provide a one-on-one for him, and that's extremely concerning to me. This has been our heart and soul. They are angels and light in what has been a very dark experience through Peabody Public Schools. I will not lie. I just cannot implore you enough to reconsider even putting this out to bid. I understand the survey went out. I got it at a school that does not have any after-school programming. And I question the validity of responses to such a questionnaire where there is no after-school programming in certain schools. How do parents know who have no opportunity, or who do not experience or do not partake in any after-school? There's approximately 300 kids that are serviced now in after-school programming. Approximately, from my numbers, 2,770 elementary students within the district. 300 are being serviced, 600 so responded to the questionnaire. I think it's a very small sample. I also think, is it the sample of all the parents who currently use the program? I think that should have been the first step to finding out, do we need to go out to bid? Maybe all us parents who are the customers and consumers are extraordinarily happy with the program. You can read my letter and see why I'm so happy. But without naming names, I think it should have come to us first, the consumers of the after-school program, who pay the tuition, who entrust their kids to these programs on vacation during the summer all kinds of things. The excellent field trips in the summer. I could go on and on and on specifically, but I won't. But I think in generalities, I think it's really important that I think you should really consider, before moving forward with any proposal, meeting with the people who currently use the program, meet with those parents of the 300 children, and find out where we stand and where we feel, because we're the ones that you're going to affect. I implore you to read my letter. It is very significant for a parent with, a son in a substantially separate program. These types of things and these types of opportunities greatly affect the family, greatly affect his self-esteem, his connection to people, and it's important to have excellent staff working with him. And I don't believe in my heart that there'll be another program out there that can do that. That would have to be looked at really, really closely. I don't know if my son, I'm guessing, maybe there's another mother like me out there, I doubt it, but who pushed so hard to have him back at his home school where he needed to be in a social environment. I can't attest to that, but those kids, in addition to just general ed children, really do benefit from these programs. It's a time to, recess is so small. It's a time to play. It's a time to grow. It's a time to do different activities. And for most people, it's every parent is working. I don't know very many that don't, and I'm a single mom, so it's extremely important to me to have these things in place for just the well-being of our home life. I go to pick him up early, 5 minutes early, and he's pissed. He wants to stay, he's active, he's having fun, and he's with all the kids in the neighborhood. And I just think the support that they provide, the one-on-one that is currently in place for him is really, really key. And again, for the kids with special needs moving forward, I think other parents in my son's program have said to me, I try to stay out of it, how the heck do you even have him in a program? Because no matter where I put my child, it's unsuccessful. Whether it's Bruce McCory's or something else, it's unsuccessful. And I think you have a significant population of children who cannot even access after-school programming. And if you decide, which I pray that you don't, to move forward with any proposal, that please do not neglect. I don't see Mr. Verbitz here. I think he should be on school committee as a member, because it's a whole population that has no representation, and it's very concerning to me. Again, I just implore you to read the letter that outlines exactly, you don't want to hear specifics, but when FKO does come to bid, like everybody else does, read this and consult with us parents who utilize them currently. Thank you.
Pam, thank you, and those are very important points. I am going to read the letter, I assure you, and sorry to cut you off. I assured the providers that contacted us that we wouldn't get into specifics about the providers, so I didn't mean to cut you off, or please don't take that in any way. What you said was very important, and I'm glad you came today, and we will read the letter, and certainly those are discussions that we're going to have in the future, so I'm glad you came today, and thank you for your comments. Welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Amy Turcott, 7 Dartmouth Street. So my first question is, are we looking at before school care also in the RFP? Because as we all know, elementary school starts at 8:55, and most working parents have to be at work by 9 at the latest. My son is at open enrollment at South due to the fact that both my husband and I work, and South is the only school that I'm aware of that has a before school program. This is crucial for working parents in the city. I understand what the last speaker said, but we got to look universally for all the schools, and all before school and after school. One of the things that I think about is, if we have a great enriching after school program, it's going to make the Peabody school system better, and the reputation goes up, and then housing values go up. This is all tied to even people without children in the school system. Marblehead is looked at as a great school system, and they have before school and after school programs. Swampscott, for example, has retired teachers that run the before school and after school program. How exciting is that, that that educators are there to take care of your kids? And the city of Swampscott runs this program. Peabody should be in there doing what other towns are doing. We have to take an active role. We can't just let it fall out there. There's working parents that need help, and these kids are really, they're barely surviving. So that's my 2 cents. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Amy. And that's what we wanted to kind of gauge from the public as to the interest in the morning. Oh, go ahead, come on up. Before school program.
The survey was awesome, and I'm not surprised that so many parents answered it. I think that tonight turnout would have been huge if something went home in the mail. I randomly found out about the meeting today, and I think that the turnout would have been huge if we could have got something in everyone's classroom saying that this discussion was going to happen tonight. Just my 2 cents.
Thank you. And we were very curious, particularly in the two schools that don't have the after-school program. We wanted to see if there would be interest there, because that's certainly we're going to have consider going forward as well. I believe the West School does not have the after-school program. And is it the South?
The South has a separate program already.
They have the Passos. So that's what we wanted to see in that particular school, too, if there was interest as well. And we wanted to kind of get a sense from the community as to interest in the before-school program. So that was certainly a big part of the survey as well. And, it's always one of those things to, you hope for the best when you put out a survey to get a lot of information. We got about 23% approximately return, which sadly is more than the number of people who vote in our city on big elections. So, but it was good to get at least some responses that we could kind of factor into our discussions. But thank you, Amy, I appreciate that. Anybody else that would like to come up?
You might want to say that there is before-school language in the RFP. So there is,
Want to go ahead? You can.
there is before-school language in the RFP, Amy. So we're asking for both before and after-school programming. The South School has before and after-school programming already through Passos Avantes, so we're not going to compete with that. But in all of the other schools that we're asking about, there's before and after-school language for the other schools. So we are asking for proposals in both, in all of the other schools. I think the West School has Passos Avantes in the morning, but not in the afternoon. So we'll be trying to get as much programming in every school possible, both before and after school.
Pam, come on up. Yep.
I too, when my son was at the center school, I will concur. I mean, now my son gets bused, because we're across town in a different program, so he gets bused. But I do agree with you. I've always been a working parent, and the late start time was a huge, huge problem also. I had to rely on neighbors and family and stuff to get him to school. I just want to make sure whatever goes out to bid, typically, sometimes with some of the programs, I don't know, like at the West program, there is no after school, and I've tried to work with Dr. Carnaccio since my son went there, and they've done surveys and stuff, and they've said that there's not enough parent interest to start a program there, and I can't speak to the current. I've tried very hard to get an after-school program at the West School in the year and a half my son has been there, and there has been no parent interest. That's one concern. And the preschool or the program that's there, sometimes what happens with some of those programs, and I'm speaking off the cuff right now, is that there's an age cutoff. So say like through kindergarten, so I don't know if Passos covers the entire elementary, or if they just cover up to kindergarten. There are some programs that cover through like age 6 because it's like part of the preschool, because I know Passos Avante is a preschool at the South, so they might only cover after-school care through kindergarten. For licensure, I don't think you can have certain age groups within 48 months apart of each other, blah, blah, blah. So that'd be something to consider. What's currently in the schools, can they cover that before care all the way through 5th grade? That would be my question on that one. So I just wanted to add my 2 cents about that, because I'm not sure what the age range on some of that before care coverage.
Yeah, thank you, Pam. Well, we did the provision in the RFP, and again, this is just the draft that we're working off of, was that the Peabody School Department may consider initiating a before-school program at one or more locations served under the after-school program. Contractor may be asked to present the superintendent of schools an educational and operational plan describing proposed services to be included in the before-school program has maybe operated at one or more school locations during the regular school year. So we felt that that was an important piece of the survey and an important piece of the RFP. We wanted to see if there was a desire and an interest in the before-school program, and then we're going to ask any provider to, potential provider, to talk about that and how the programming would work. So, you know, certainly my wife and I work. It's a strain on us with our 3 kids in the schools, and I thought this would be something that would be of interest, and that's what the survey we wanted to find out. So thank you both for speaking on that. Great. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward? Please come up. Welcome, and if you could please state your name and address.
My name is Pina Daniel, 129 Winona Street. I just want to reiterate what I believe Amy said, just about morning programs and evening programs just being extremely important. I'm a working parent as well, my husband as well. We're both working in the Boston area. We've been working in the Boston area for over 15 years. It's very important to have a morning program as well as an evening program. For example, I had to hire a babysitter in the morning just to drive my daughter to school. So you have to hire someone to bring her to school. I have to have her in after-school programs. It's very difficult with the late start, so I'm a huge advocate for a morning program. I'm also part of the Parent Advisory Board, which brought that survey forward, so it's definitely near and dear to my heart. I'm also supposed to be, my children are supposed to be at the West School, but because there is no after-school program, I had to open enroll at the McCarthy School, which has been wonderful. But I will say that I also tried very hard to get an after-school program at the West School and was told there was no need for it. And I don't know that a survey actually did go out, but I was told repeatedly that there was no need, even though I hear anecdotally from parents and friends that there is the need. So I just wanted to raise that as well. I guess that's just my 2 cents. I just wanted to know that I feel very strongly about it, and that from parents that I speak to, they also feel very strongly about having both a morning program and an evening program as well.
Thank you. Yep, Mrs. Mashoni, come on up.
Kathleen Mashoni, 51 Newcastle Road. I'm a grandparent. I just wanted to pick up on the idea of equity among the schools. And the other idea is that it should be enrichment. You know, I'm not saying the program that there is, but I also talk to people in other cities where there are wonderful classes going on for these children. Parents today who are working are willing to sort of, you know, pay that money and hope that the kids can take a book group at the after-school program, and that they have a little baseball game outside and stuff like this, which I'm not sure is happening now. So the 2 things that I've always been concerned of living over here on this side of the city, which is class size, et cetera, but also equity. You know, let's make sure the schools, if they offer something, that it's the same, and that really maybe it's pie in the sky, but why can't we talk about enrichment in some way rather than sending the kids to McCory's or something, which I'm not against, but there's just so much wonderful time there, and it would be a wonderful addition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mashoni. Anybody else would like to come forward and speak? Yep. Mr. Odessa, come on up.
As you're coming forward, Mr. Odessa, I'd like to just take a minute, if I could, to explain to our audience that we have our students who are shadowing us tonight, and I'd like to explain for just a moment what it is that we're doing. This is a public hearing. This is a legal proceeding where the public, anybody in the Peabody community, has an opportunity to speak on this particular issue, which tonight is after-school programming, or after-school and before-school programming. The school committee has developed what is called an RFP or an RFR, which is request for proposals, which will take a legal route through the purchasing agent's office, and he happens to be sitting right there, Dan Doucette. When this proceeding is over this evening, if the school committee approves the document that has been formulated, the document will go to his office, and within a 3 or a 4 week period, it will be advertised as such, and then people will apply to be the provider for the Peabody Public Schools for both after-school and before-school programming. What we're doing this evening is, before we send that out and advertise, we're hearing from the public as to what it is that we would like to see in after-school and before-school programming. Okay? Great.
Thank you. Mr. Odessa?
I'm Brian Odessa from 26 Bowditch Street here in Peabody. First of all, I just want to say thank you as a positive step forward in actually your part in putting out this survey. I think that was a really important first step in improving upon some of the communication with the community, with parents of the children that we are purported to serve here. That being said, in looking at this survey, the survey itself to me seems skeletal in a lot of different ways. You've heard some people come up here and speak about different things like before school care. One of the things that was kind of alluded to was support for students with disabilities or special needs. There are some things like that that are not really mentioned here in the survey. The survey covers some nuts and bolts demographics about, would you be interested in using it? What grade levels would your children be in? What cost of a program is okay, is too much? It asks for, what would be the determining factor, and you give 3 options there, which, are 3 of many options, and you ask us to pick one. So I think it's kind of limiting in that way. As far as consideration for what I would like to see is I would like that flexibility with some before school time as well, as you've mentioned. You said that's going to be in the language of the RFP. I think that needs to be beyond just the box program that's offered at some of the schools. The hours of operation is fantastic in terms of when we need what we need for our kids. Vacation time during the times when school is closed, and the summertime when school is out of session, to have those opportunities in there. I think that absolutely should be included as well. One thing I didn't see in here, while it did talk about money, it discussed cost, it did not say anything about the importance of providing support for families that are dealing with financial hardship, and I think that should definitely be in the proposal as well, considering some history with hard work that's been done to provide different grant opportunities and things like that for those reasons. One thing that really truly concerns me is the staff, and again, not to discuss one group over another. I would like to make sure that, or at least urge you very strongly, that wording can be put in there that there will be a commitment by whomever you decide upon when this vote is taken, that there will be enough staff, and not just enough in terms of number of bodies, but there will be staff who are experienced, who are licensed, who are certified to provide the kind of care that our kids need. One of the things that's become even more clear, crystallized this year, is that when significant changes in staff occur, that there is a disruption, that there are rippling effects, and we want to make sure that that is minimized, as much as possible. And one of the concerns in the last go-around with this was the commitment to being able to have enough staff members who would be licensed and certified without a dynamic change. Those are the things that I would like to make sure that we urge you as parents to put in there. I want to thank you again for allowing us to be here and make public comment and have our voices heard, considering that they are our children that we're serving. And we are directly involved with our cost that we're paying for these programs. It's a good first step, and I would really like to see, and I do thank you all, especially after, hearing in that, November 10th meeting that there was not going to be a public comment period. So for you to include us, I think our voice is very important, and we'd like to be involved in this entire process as much as our voices can be heard, and we can be. You had made a comment about, 20% or so in terms of the responses on this survey, which is more than the number of people who typically come out to vote in Peabody. And I think that that's important. I think it's a great first start, but I would continue to urge the school committee here, through the Parent Advisory Board and as many other means as necessary, to continue to promote what you're doing here, to continue to get the word out. 617 responses to this survey, and there's maybe 30 people in this room. I don't think that is representative of the number of people who responded to the survey, because I don't think there was enough notice about things that went out. Also, if we do have households that do not have English as their foreign language here, and I think the timeline for when translations of documents need to be made and be sent out effectively, that needs to be examined. So, you know, I've heard from people today who have said, you know, we didn't receive anything, we don't understand, we didn't know what was going on, and I would like to urge you as best we can to try to make that message more clear and be as proactive as possible as we go forward. We had checked in some of the school buildings to check for notice of this particular meeting and didn't see it until today. In some of the schools. So if we could be a little bit clearer on that too, so we can have more notice of what's going on. We want to be involved. And you know, I don't want to be against anybody in this room. I want to be a part of the process. And so if we can have that notice, I think we can make that an easier process for everybody involved. So those are the things that I would say. I appreciate you taking the time to hear my voice, and I hope that you continue to hear the voice of the parents who are going to be involved in this process. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Brian. And yeah, we've been trying to come up with ways to reach out and include the public. The survey was very important. We've been trying to work with the Parent Advisory Board to come up with suggestions and thoughts on this. I know the superintendent sent out a Connect Ed message to parents asking them to complete the survey. So we've been trying to work on that, but we'll continue to do so because it's very important to get the public comment, and the comments today about the before school program and a lot of the comments, because there were not only questions that were asked, but there was requests for comments in the survey. Just having read through many of them, a lot of them were about the before school program and trying to offer that to help with working families and things. So that was very valuable. This is done.
Very briefly, Mr. Chairman, just for the information for everyone, this survey was translated into 2 languages. It did go home with the families who required translation services, and it did go out the day after the bulk of the surveys went to the schools, but these were translated and sent to the appropriate families.
It was Spanish and Portuguese? Yeah, okay. Anybody else? Mr. Hockman.
I think Mr. Odessa's point is that the proposal, the RFP, has not been translated to those languages, and people that speak those languages or read those languages as their primary language wouldn't have a true opportunity to come forward and discuss the content of the RFP.
Okay. Thank you. Is anyone else in the audience that would like to come forward and speak? Yes, please. Welcome, and if you could just state your name and address, please.
Erin Goodwin, Durenz's 21 Hillside Ave. I would just like to repeat what's already been said here this evening by other parents about the importance of the before school and after school program. As a working parent, I think an 8:50 start time is really a hardship and somewhat unrealistic. And for me, with a child who's going to be going into kindergarten in the fall, my options are very limited as to what I can do. I work in Boston, and I have to be in Boston by 9 o'clock. My husband has to be at work at 7. We don't have the luxury that some parents have of having grandparents available to take the kids to school in the morning. So my options are to find a stranger to take my kids to school, move to a different city, or consider private school if this program isn't available. So this would be a huge benefit to my family, and I know to many other families who, for whatever reason, couldn't be here tonight. So I wanted to get up, and I know that other people have already mentioned this before, but I just wanted to stress that so that it's not lost on the committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, could you say your name again, please?
Sure. Erin Goodwin, Durenz's.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Erin. Anybody else would like to come forward and speak? Yep, come on up. Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Peach. If you could just please give your name and address.
Stephanie Peach, 33 Fulton Street. I'm here tonight. I've always been a supporter of the after-school program that we currently have, but I'm here to speak on behalf of my niece, who's a kindergartner at South School, who begs me every day if I can pick her up so she doesn't have to go to the after-school program. The after-school program, it's great, where my sister and brother-in-law can't get there to pick her up on time from school, but it's really, they plop her in front of her computer or she gets to sit in color. There's really no engaging activity, there's no outside time. It's really just sit here till mom or dad gets here, and she hates it. So I think that as we move forward, there needs to be within whatever program that we pick as a city, it needs to be equitable across all the schools, as was mentioned. I think having 2 schools or 3 schools who don't currently have after-school programs or the same after-school programs isn't equitable. It's not fair to the kids that go to those schools. And some of those schools are already, they have less well-off students to begin with that could really benefit from extra learning. I think we need to move forward and make sure that we're providing students with actual education after school, not just babysitting after school. My niece doesn't want to play computer after school or just sit there and color. She wants to learn, she wants to be engaged, and I think the current after-school program we have does provide that, and it's unfortunate that it's not across the entire city, so I just encourage you to include that in the RFP, that each school will have this available to them. Every student in our city should have the same opportunities, and I think that's really important, so thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to come forward and speak? The microphone is open. Great. All right. Well, thank you. And it was very important to have you here today. We appreciate your comments. Many of the comments we've heard today are very well written out in the comment section of the survey too. So it was helpful both to survey and to have people speaking today. Your comments are important. And open it up to the school committee if there's any thoughts or comments or questions. We definitely have the language in the RFP about the before-school program. Clearly, I think all of us can tell that that's very important to have, and I'm glad that we've been able to get the information. I think that drives home the point very clearly that this is something we need strongly to consider when we do listen to the presentations and ask questions of the potential providers. So that is included. That does give us the ability to go that direction, should we want to, and that's something, as I said, we're going to have to strongly consider. Is there any other comments or questions from school committee members? Mrs. Dunn?
Mr. Chairman, perhaps if we could explain to the members of the public what our next step is. Right now is a public hearing, which will close, and then our regular business meeting is actually when we are going to be able to discuss a lot and hear from Mr. Doucette and Dr. Levine. So if we could explain, we've just got some things we have to do, and then if folks can stay, they will hear more about this.
And again, we have the option tonight to go ahead and vote and start the process to release the RFP tonight, or we could continue to take it under advisement and take it up at a further meeting and vote at that time. As the superintendent outlined, we'd be looking at the release of the RFP through our purchasing agent, Dan Doucette, and then we would provide the appropriate amount of time, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever we're comfortable with. We can establish the dates as to when any responses would be made by any potential provider. From there, we would set up public hearings with those providers to make presentations to the school committee and anybody else that would like to attend, and then we would begin our deliberations. We will take that up at the regular scheduled meeting. Any further comments before we break to go to the regular scheduled meeting in 15 minutes? Mr. Rosignol, then Mr. Hockman.
Thank you. Just to address a couple of concerns regarding staffing and experience, meaning the staff's experience. I know that's, both of those are addressed in the RFP. Ratios are addressed in regards to grade level, and staffing is addressed as well. So I just wanted that to be noted.
Dr. Levine, did you want to mention?
Yeah. I think we have to be very careful not to overspecify in the RFP. That's not what the RFP is for. You have certain expectations of a way a program is going to run. I think the school committee has certain expectations that the superintendent will oversee any program that comes into the school system, and the superintendent will have certain expectations as to how the program will run. That would include meeting state guidelines regarding ratios of teachers and staff to students, and I believe that there are well-defined state guidelines beyond which, if we violated those state guidelines, funding would be pulled and certification would be pulled for those programs. We always look at resumes and certifications of teachers, making certain that that people that are with our children are well qualified to be with our children, as we do with any people that we put in front of our kids. So I think those are well addressed already in the RFP in generic language. And I do think that we're getting to the point where we do need to get an RFP on the street because we need to begin the process and we need to end the process because we need to know who it is that's going to be running our programs for next September 1.
Thank you. Mr. Hockman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank the citizens that completed the surveys to provide us the feedback that we need and are listening to when it comes to developing this RFP. I'd also like to thank the citizens that appeared tonight and testified because that feedback is also valuable. If I may address two specific points within the RFP, and we talked about them at our last meeting. I'm just not sure if paragraph 3.1, which talks about enrollment, at our last, it's limited to children who are or become eligible to be students to attend Peabody elementary schools. I questioned whether or not we would be able to have any citizen of Peabody elementary aged that would be able to attend programs, and if we can include that in the RFP.
I believe that that would be by vote of the school committee. That's the intent, whatever the intent of the school committee is.
And if I may, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. The only other question that I had was with regard to the schedule, which is in paragraph 4.2. We had talked about having after-school programs available on early release days.
Yes, and Mr. Hockman, you've mentioned that before, and I think you're right on. That is something that I would like to, or at least I don't want to speak for the committee, but I think that is something that we should have on those early release days to make sure that there'd be coverage. That's the issue.
Yes, are you inferring that I'm not right on with enrollment?
What's that?
Are you inferring that I'm not right on when it comes to the enrollment question? I'm just joking, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, that one I don't know. That one, that was the first time I heard that one. But the other one you brought up, and I think you're right on. You're usually right on, Mr. Hockman. Well, thank you. Any other comments or questions before we break to go to the regular meeting? I know we're going to be taking this up at that time as well, and the meeting is about 10 minutes. Any other comments? Hearing none? Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, Pam? Okay. Can we tell them? We'll take that up when we go to the regular meeting here. Yep. Mr. Odessa, yeah. Thank you. Did you want to speak to that? Sure. Yeah, middle school.
Yeah, actually, that's under discussion. We do have a small program at the middle school right now. There's some question as to what that might look like in the future. Although it's not in this RFP, it's certainly under discussion for the future, for the near future. We've also discussed a partnership with the public library as well for middle school kids. But on campus at the Higgins Middle School, that's under discussion right now.
Great, thank you. That'll conclude the meeting, and we're going to start the regular meeting in about 10 minutes. Thank you, everybody. Okay. I'd like to call the regular school committee meeting to order, today being March 8th, 2016. This meeting is being recorded today by the Peabody School Committee's recording secretary, Leanna Harris. The matters listed below are those reasonably anticipated by the chair, which may be discussed at the meeting. Not all items listed in the agenda may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by law. I'd like to first start with, if everybody could please rise for a moment of silence, and then to be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Well, before we go to the agenda items, I did want to take a moment to introduce our student government counterparts. Our student government program has been an important part of our city now for, I believe it's over 44 years, I believe. And it's really an excellent program that allows our high school seniors to run for different offices in the city. And if elected, they would get to join their counterpart in city government, in our schools, to go around and learn a little bit about their job. And it's a great learning experience, not only for the students, but also for the city officials and those that get to take part in it. And we have a number of our school committee members and school administrators here today. And I'd like to go around, and if each could introduce themselves, starting with our mayor.
Hi, my name is Christina Pescatori, and I'm mayor.
Hi, my name is Catherine McGrath, and I'm counterpart to Dr. Levine, superintendent.
My name is Ted Izzo, and I am the Human Resources Director.
Hi, I'm Katrina Silva. I'm school business manager.
Hi, I'm Emily Sylvanowitz, and I'm on the school committee.
Hi, I'm Serena Santos, and I'm on school committee.
I'm Rachel Chica, and I'm on the school committee.
I'm Austin Sullivan, and I'm on school committee.
Hi, I'm Brianna MacDonald, and I'm on the school committee.
I'm Sarah Blanchett. I'm on school committee.
Well, welcome to all of you, and it's great to have you here for the meeting. We got a number of important topics to discuss, and it's wonderful that you're here today to work with us. First, I'd like to start with approval of minutes from our last meeting, February 23rd, 2016.
Motion to approve.
Okay. You've heard the motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second has been made. Thank you. Any comments on approval of minutes from February 23rd, 2016, regular school committee meeting minutes? Hearing none, roll call vote for its acceptance.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
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 Thank you. Next item is approval of bills.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to approve warrant A2982 dated March 8th, 2016 in the amount of $670,512.44 subject to audit.
Okay.
Second.
Great. Thank you. You've heard the motion for approval of warrant 2982 made by Mrs. Carpenter, seconded by Mr. Hockman. Roll call vote.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
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 Okay, I want the students to know that their yeses just spent $670,000.
And they're about to spend some more.
They're about to spend some more. Mrs. Carpenter?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion for warrant B, number 2983, dated March 8th, 2016, in the amount of $124,532.56, subject to audit.
Second.
Thank you. You've heard the motion by Mrs. Carpenter, seconded by Mr. Hockman for approval of warrant 2983. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hoffman?
Yes.
Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter?
Yes.
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 Thank you. That was just only 124,000. Okay. If there's no objection, I'd like to go to continued business. It's actually item number 2, the RFP for the after-school program. Prior to this evening's meeting, we held a public hearing. A number of Peabody residents and parents came forward with some suggestions and thoughts on language for our request for proposal to go out for our after-school program. And certainly a very major topic in those discussions was about a before-school program. And we also had a survey that went out to our elementary school families. We received over 600 responses to our survey requesting information and thoughts on after-school, before-school programming, and it was very valuable. We were able to utilize that language, utilize those responses to come up with the language that's in front of us today. And I wanted to open it up to the school committee for discussion. We have the ability to go ahead and approve the request for proposals this evening to have that go out for bid, or we can certainly take it under advisement and have it at a later date. We do have our purchasing agent, Mr. Dan Doucette, here if there's any questions, and certainly our superintendent and assistant superintendent are here to answer any questions as well. I'll open it up to the school committee. Mrs. Carpenter.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. Dr. Levine, there was a comment about after-school care going over to for the Higgins, and you did mention. I know we've had the Boys and Girls Club there before, and there's like a smaller group. This I don't believe is in our RFP. Could you just explain what we have there, and if we should include this, and maybe have a little conversation about it?
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Yeah, I don't think we should include it in this particular RFP. I don't think we're ready for it yet. I'm not sure what we think that it should look like yet. We're going into a new building. We do have a relatively small program run by the Boys and Girls Club, and we have for some time. It is a program that is very inexpensive. I believe it's a $10 charge per year. I think that we would like to take a look at that program along with the executive director of that program and the principal of the school. I think he has some ideas as to what he would like to see that program be in the future, and I think that we need to take a look collaboratively and put our heads together to talk about what the middle school program might look like. It's fine the way it is, but it needs to expand, and I think it needs to get a bit more enriched. And I think that we can work with each other to do that. I don't think we're ready for an RFP there.
Thank you. In addition to that, I would just like to talk about some of the needs of being equal throughout the district. Just as a little bit of history, I was on the board when we first proposed an after-school program, and it started very small. Several other members were on there as well. And we started small because we didn't know what to expect. And every year, or even every maybe 6 months, we did increase schools. And every year when a new school year came about, we would ask and we would poll the other schools. A lot of people had talked about the West. Each time we had asked, and we would let the after-school program that we have now inquire about it, there wasn't enough kids to service. It just wasn't worth it at the time. Needs definitely change. I did hear several people here speak tonight that they open enroll their students at other schools just to have that care. So I would like to see equality throughout the district. I'd also like to point out that in this RFP, we do specify that the language actually says the optimal program design will provide activities to meet the needs of the school community at each particular location and support a broad spectrum of students, including children in ELL programs and those with identified special needs. So there was a woman here tonight who specifically spoke about her child who needed extra care, and I did speak with her on the way out, and I did ensure her that that is something that is included in the RFP. So I just wanted to state those two things, and I think you're right, Dr. Levine, about maybe leaving the middle school out right now. And it is a very relatively short amount of money that they pay, $10 a year. So I do appreciate them, and I'd just like to thank everyone that came out tonight.
Through the mayor.
Yes, Dr. Levine.
Thank you. To clarify a couple of points also that were spoken about tonight, the person who spoke eloquently about her child in need of special needs, I know her well. I've met with her on a number of occasions. The school system has been extremely supportive of her this year and her needs, and she and her child have had a very good year in combination of a couple of schools. So I wanted to make that clear that child has been very well supported. Secondly, it was this school committee, when I was here in 2011, if you remember, the Jewish Community Center, I believe, moved from the western part of Peabody to a different location. And at that time, I brought that to you, and I asked that you consider opening a PASOS program at the West because to service the needs of the western part of Peabody. And it was this school committee that agreed to do that, specifically for the needs of the parents in the western part of the city. And the morning program has been a tremendous success. I think the afternoon program has struggled to get enough interest to be vibrant, and we can certainly take a look at that and survey the parents once again to see how many parents might be interested in an afternoon program. I am going to suggest as well a third point. There was a kind of an allusion to the South School program, the after-school program tonight. I've been here 2 different years. I have never received anything but wonderful reports and kudos about what goes on in Paso Savante, the after-school program, and early morning program run by Paso Cervantes at the South School, and I wanted to make that clear. We have been very pleased as a community with what's been provided in that program at the South, and I am going to recommend to you that no matter what you do tonight, that the South School come out of the language for the RFP, because we have no intention of competing with Paso Cervantes, which has been a vibrant program at the South School for years. We do not intend to take that out of the South School in this RFP process. That the South School happens to be in the language was simply an oversight. So I intend to take that out with your approval. That is all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Thank you, Dr. Levine. Comments, Mr. Olympio, and then Mr. Miko.
Through the chair, Mr. Levine, in your experience, what is the minimum amount of students they need for an after-school program? And is there a hard and fast number, or?
I don't have that answer, Mr. Olympio, but I can get that answer for you tomorrow. I don't know what a minimum number of students it would take. It's a good question to make a program run. I don't know the answer to that. I would assume that financial considerations, staffing, et cetera, come into play, because the state demands certain staffing and a site director for every program that runs. So in order to pay a site director and in order to have certain minimum staffing, you have to have a certain number of kids to make it viable. I will find out what that number is.
And another question. The RFP, so does that mean that we're going to take the West out of it, the morning Paso Zavante out of that?
My suggestion would be to take the West morning program out and the South completely out, and leave the West afternoon program in.
Thank you, Mr. Olympio. Mr. Miko?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through the chair to superintendent and the committee, we've heard earlier about the importance of before-school programs and the flexibility that working parents need in order to get their students safely to school and then get themselves off to school. I'd also like to see something in terms of flexibility with an early pickup in the after-school program, a staggered schedule, possibly a 4 p.m. pickup and a 6 p.m. pickup, and rates accordingly set due to the time of pickup. That way, someone who may pick up early isn't charged till 6 p.m. Just to, again, to give some flexibility to parents, but the before-school program is definitely crucial, and I echo what the parents had said earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. Mrs. Carpenter?
Through the chair, Dr. Levine, your suggestion of taking out the south for parcels, did one of the women here had talked about an age difference. Are they only allowed to care for children up to a certain age, or can they service the entire school?
I do not think that they service the entire school, but I'll find that out as well. And I'll get that information to you tomorrow. Actually, Kara may have the answer to that.
I believe they do service K through 5, but numbers, I will find that out for sure.
Okay. Kara does think that they service K through 5 at the South.
Okay, so we think that they will be able to handle any age child in the south?
At the South, yep.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Mr. Hockman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to see the enrollment open to all residents, age-appropriate residents in the city of Peabody. They would be responsible for their own transportation and so forth, but I'd like to see that available to all students, all age-appropriate children. I'd also like to see the schedule to include the early release days. I don't see any reason why. Actually, I think on those days we might have more of a need for after-school care. It becomes difficult for parents who are working or are not able to get to pick their children up. With regard to
we do service for early release days. They adjust their schedule. And through the mayor, the issue of whether or not children who do not attend our schools would have access to any after-school or before-school program would have to be by vote of the school committee.
I do understand that we're going to vote on the RFP. I'm just suggesting that the document before us, if the mayor is asking us to vote on something, I would wish to amend it, and I can do that by way of a vote or a motion later. Do you, through Mr. Mayor, to either Dr. Levine or Ms. Murtagh, do you know if there's and I agree with Dr. Levine, the Paso Cervantes does a wonderful job both at the South and the West School, but do you know if there are they saturated there? Are there any children that want to go to that program that aren't capable of going to it because of staffing limits or anything else?
We'll find out that answer tomorrow, but my sense is that whenever I go to the South School, they're packed.
That's my sense too, so I don't necessarily want to exclude the South from this RFP. I don't want to infringe upon Paso Cervantes. I think it's a great program, but if there are other students that require or could benefit from before or after school care that aren't able to access Pasos because of staff limitations or whatever other limitations they may have, I would not want to exclude the South School from the RFP unless there's space available in Paso Cervantes. And again, we wouldn't want to infringe upon that. And the last question I have at this time is, what is your expectation for these proposals to be submitted by?
I've worked very closely with the purchasing agent, and from the time that you give the okay for a final document, the purchasing agent suggests a 3-week timeline for advertisement. He feels that that's a reasonable amount of time of turnaround. And he can speak to that because I believe he's still here. Dan, is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. Anything? Okay. We're good? Mr. Rosino.
Thank you. Through the chair, is there anything that Mr. Doucette would like to add?
A man of few words.
I guess so.
Mrs. Dunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of facts to bring up, and then I do have a question for Mr. Doucette. One of the things that I found most interesting from hearing parents tonight, as well as hearing the parents at the Parent Advisory Board meeting, were how many people utilize open enrollment based upon where their child is going to get before or after school care. It isn't necessarily based upon an educational program that they're looking for, it's the care. And I think that that's what's driving a lot of the need for these programs, because so many people are working in Boston or at a distance. One of the things that the survey showed was that out of, from the 630 people, 65 felt that they needed before school care. 198 needed after school care. 315 needed both. So there is a significant need for the before school care as well. And I know that we have that in the RFP. I don't know how much more detail we could put in that or how much we could highlight that, but I do think we really do need to stress that this is not just looking for after school care. I do think we have to bring in before school care. The hours are amazing. People were looking for this to start at 6:30 in the morning and go to 6:30 at night. That's quite a long day. I don't know if you would want to include those types of details in the RFP, or if that, I know that once someone bids on this, then they need to come to us with a proposal of what their program would entail. But that was something that was, I thought that was pertinent. People were looking, of course, for price and convenience, and the whole issue of being able to have their children receive this care at the school that they attend was, again, what was driving a lot of the decisions on this. When, excuse me, when we have this posted and programs will come forward with their plan, we did talk a lot about equity, and previously we had a discussion of possibly bringing in 2 different programs. Does the RFP allow us to look at different ones and perhaps find if there was a specific need? For example, PASOS is a separate program that fits the need of the South School. In the years past, when we did first start talking about after-school care, one of the things that happened at the West School and I think it was at the Burke, we had students were transported to the Burke because there wasn't enough interest at the West. Even in the in this survey, we received 47, 52, 60 responses at the West. 47 would be interested, would consider using after-school care. 5 no, and 8 it depended upon the program. But under the terms of this RFP, is that something that can happen where a program might come into us, it would not be profitable? That was the reason they didn't do this at certain schools, because they didn't have enough of a base to support their costs. But under this, would we be able to look at additional companies to cover the schools that perhaps one program didn't have interest in?
There is nothing in the RFP that would disallow you from doing that. You, as school committee, by whatever vote you take, you could choose one provider for all the schools, or you could choose 2 providers as you see fit, or you could chop it up. It's your call by vote of the school committee.
Okay, and through the chair, we could conceivably have 2 different programs, one after school, one before school?
Through the chair.
Vendors, I should say vendors.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, all right, thank you. The other question I had is actually for Mr. Doucette. Come on up, Dan.
Dan, why don't you take a seat?
Through the chair. Mr. Doucette, with an RFP, what is the length of time for a contract that can be issued by virtue of that RFP, and how often would we need to put this out to bid?
Generally, any contract by a public body that has some connection with Chapter 30B is limited to 3 years, with certain exceptions for other things, but not a program like what's being discussed this evening.
So this is definitely, I know it says it in the RFP, it would be for 3 years, and then we would put it out to bid again?
There is a provision that the city council could, upon, I believe, recommendation of the school committee, make a local change to make it a longer contract. That's never been done since Chapter 30B went into effect in 1990, I think, except with one exception. So it's not something we generally do. When it's done by the city council, it's not done by the school committee.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Just wanted to let the committee members know that the details of this survey have been provided to the staff, and that the comments that you see in here are not actually completed. There are still some to go in, but just from looking at them, the majority of comments are, people are very conscious of the cost, of the time. It's all the things that parents have reiterated tonight. And so I thank the Parent Advisory Board for coming up with this survey. I thank the parents who responded to it, the people who came out tonight to speak to these questions, and I want to thank Mr. Doucette because I appreciate your answer. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Any further comments, Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. Through the chair, Dr. Levine, I just want to go over this one more time. The South has PASOs. The West has PASOs. Isn't that just for preschool? Wouldn't they only be able to service up to age 7?
Chair. I believe the Pasos Avantes program has an after-school program as well at the South. I don't know what it does at the West. No, none at the West. So it would service a preschool at the West, nothing in the afternoon, but it would also service a preschool at the South and an after-school program at the South.
Are you still asking us to remove them from the RFP?
Through the chair. Yes, I see no reason why, as long as we're correct that it can service the whole school, I see no reason why we should compete with a successful program that's already in place and has been in place for years and contributes financially to the school district.
Right. Just to clarify, so at the West, they service before and after?
No, just before.
Just before?
Yes.
So we would still need it included in the RFP for after
For the
school?
after school at the West.
Okay. And the proposal would be just to remove it from the South?
That's correct.
From the South. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any further? Mr. Olympio.
Chair, Dr. Levine, so at the South, elementary school kids, that Pasos Avantes services, just not preschool?
That is through the chair, that is my understanding. Both before and after school. So before school it would be the little kids, after school it would be the whole school, after school programming.
Through the chair, so, but wouldn't we need something for all of the children beforehand at the South?
We'll check that out, get you all those answers tomorrow.
One more thing, not about that.
I think, through the chair, I think I'm batting about 750, which is Hall of Fame tonight.
Keep telling yourself that. Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. I would just like to propose to the committee that maybe we change the top language where it says invitation for response from operators for after-school program and amend it to invitation for response from operators for before and after-school program. And I'd put that in form of a motion.
Second.
Second.
I'm sorry, can you reference that again, Mrs. Carpenter? What provision?
Mr. Mayor, at the very beginning, first page, where it says invitation for response, right below Peabody Public Schools, I would just like to add from operators of before and after school programs, just to kind of give it a little bit more.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments or questions? Oh, I'm sorry. I suppose we should make a motion on that. Okay, was it seconded by Mr. Rossignol? I apologize. Thank you. Roll call vote.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Mrs. Dunn, then Mr. Hockman.
I apologize, I cannot remember what I was going to ask. Oh, I know. Through you to the superintendent, Dr. Levine, if we do this, are we prepared to be able to implement a before and after school program in September?
The question is better asked of the people that come before you and ask to be the successful candidate to provide that programming. I think the answer is probably yes, with one caveat. I think the greatest challenge for any provider will be staffing. If, for example, it's one company, one outside provider, and you ask them to provide both before and after school programming in as many schools as possible, that thins the pool greatly of staff members that they have to choose from. It's very hard to get enough staff members for both before and after school programming. I know that in surrounding areas, including our own, providers heavily rely on teachers that work these programs as extra jobs. But sometimes you can't get teachers. And by the way, they do not have to be certified teachers that work these programs. The state does not mandate that. But they have to be experienced, reasonable adults who we would allow to work with our children, like paraprofessionals, for example. It's hard to find those people. So I would say with the will might be there. The question would be, as we're expanding the program from just after school with a very small before school program to a larger before school program, the question would be, is the staff available? So I would say that we would be prepared program-wise. The question would be, would we be able to find the qualified staff to staff these programs?
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Hockman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to amend paragraph 4.2 of the RFP to read, the hours of operation for the after-school program will begin from the time of release to 6:30 p.m. I think Mr. Amico's point was a proper one, that maybe a little bit later would assist some parents, and we could see a fee schedule that would allow for parents to pay for actual use as opposed to the full day. So I make that motion to amend paragraph 4.2 to read from time of release to 6:30 p.m.
Second for discussion.
You've heard the motion by Mr. Hockman, seconded by Mr. Rossignol for discussion. Mr. Rossignol?
Through the chair. To Dr. Levine, are there any schools currently that the custodial services stop at 6 o'clock, or are all buildings staffed with custodial services following 6 o'clock currently?
Our custodial services stop at 7 o'clock.
Thank you.
On the motion, Mr. Olympio.
Through the chair, should we include the language for the before school hours also? The start time of the day?
Mr. Rosignol, on that question?
I think we should take them as two separate motions.
Okay. Motion in front of us, Mr. Hockman's motion to read time of release to 6:30 on provision 4.2. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Mayor, it actually needs a second for a vote. It's only been seconded for discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Rosignol seconded for discussion. Now he's seconding it for a vote. Thank you. Point of information, Dr. Levine?
The motion also included, I believe, Mr. Hockman, that you wanted an adjusted fee schedule for actual use. Is that correct?
I think that we can take that up in a separate motion.
Thank you.
Roll call vote, please.
Yes.
Yes.
They're eager.
Yes.
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 Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hockman.
So to Mr. Olympio's point, if we can also amend paragraph 4.2 or include another paragraph perhaps to include hours of operation for a before-school program. Before I make the motion, if I can ask Dr. Levine or Ms. Mertag, what time do custodians arrive at the elementary schools in the morning?
Split shift, either 6 to 2 or 7 to 3, depending upon the school.
Thank you. So I would make a motion to include hours of operation for the before-school program from 7 a.m. Until the time school starts.
Second.
You've heard the motion by Mr. Hockman, seconded by Mrs. Carpenter. Any comments, Mr. Rosignol?
Thank you. I don't want this RFP to be too bogged down with language on start times and end times. The thing that scares me about a start time, to be perfectly honest with you, is I think it honestly will depend on the building and their needs. I absolutely 100% agree that we need a before-school program. I am absolutely 100% in favor of that. I just don't want to put, we have to start at 7, we have to start at 6, we have to start at 7:30, and then the needs of that building and those students and those parents are completely different than our good intentions. So that would be my one reservation about putting a stop-dead time on beginning. I think it's very important that parents know what the latest point is of the student's day and what our capabilities of. My fear, to be perfectly honest with you, is twofold. It's one, it's going to hamstring providers to make sure that they meet that timeline, and two, it may not service the students the way we intend it to. I would rather, to be perfectly honest with you, wait for this to go out to bid, knowing that they have to provide before school activities, and then propose to us what their intentions are. That's my, so I'm not going to vote for this motion only on the fact that I don't want to hamstring the building in providing what that building needs, because I do think that there needs to be some latitude by us in what we can provide for a specific parent's needs.
Mr. Hockman, then Mrs. Carpenter.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Doucette. For this request for proposals, if after we receive the proposals, we as a body decide to enter into a contract with a provider or multiple providers, are we able to, at that point, customize these times that we're talking about right now with language in the RFP that identifies those times?
If I might, the process that we're talking about basically stems from a decision of the Inspector General that says this sort of a transaction is not required to be bid. We're conducting what I like to call a controlled competition. So long as you go into the competition and try to, as much as possible, lay out the scenarios for the potential competitors, I think you ought to have the right to be able to do some form of negotiation or scope of service. Frankly, this document is built around an after-school program. It's not built around the parameters of a before-school program. And I can tell you from having dealt with the business manager, or former business manager, and the superintendent, that there was a very brief discussion of before school, and it wasn't until, frankly, my being here tonight that I realized that this before school component is starting to gain some legs. The other concern is there are various scenarios that are coming about, which is, should one company provide both before and after? Would there be split recommendations from the superintendent? These are all things that if I were a participant, if a potential provider, I'd like some guidance, but I'd also perhaps like some flexibility. But I bow to the will of the committee because I sort of take my title literally as agent. Tell me what you want, and I'll be happy to put that out on the street.
I just think it's important to put some parameters within the RFP so that the bidders have an understanding or are capable of providing a bid that may suit the needs of some or all of the elementary schools. I don't make the motion to curtail our ability to customize programs as the needs of the buildings express themselves when the time comes.
Okay. Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. To that point, Mr. Hockman and the rest of the board, the proposal of section 4.2, where the language would be and before 7 o'clock to school start time, might I suggest that we include that language in section 8.2 that basically kind of gives us the negotiating part of where it states before school program, optional service subject to negotiation. And this paragraph basically says we're possibly looking for a before school program, and if you can do it, we would probably be looking at a start time of 7 a.m. and maybe just moving it into that language. It leaves it open. It gives it a chance to come before us in a different form and not bind anybody, and maybe that would amend for everyone.
Thank you. Mr. Amico.
Through the chair. I agree with everything everyone has said here. Also, I want to take into account the custodians, who are the first people to show up to the buildings. I want to make sure that the buildings are safe, especially during the winter months. I want to make sure the interior buildings are safe. You know, we've had some, water damage even here at City Hall. I want to make sure that they're doing their checks in the building before we send kids into the building. So by putting a time on, I want to make sure that the custodians or the principal has time to get into the building and make sure it's safe before we send kids in. So that's my point.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. Mrs. Dunn, then I'll go back to Mr. Rossignol.
Mr. Miko has a very good point, because the morning duties of the custodians need to be taken into consideration as far as what's going on in the building. They may have duties that go from the time they open until, students actually arrive that we don't know or have any understanding of, that could be impacted heavily if you have a big influx of students at 7 a.m. I would also like to make one other point as far as a start time. If you do look at the data from the survey, the highest number of people wanted a 7 a.m. start time. So it is a reasonable time to start based upon the response to the survey. As far as trying to pick a time, it's not really arbitrary. That is the time that the majority of people were looking for.
Thank you. Mr. Rossignol, did you? Okay, Mr. Hockman.
To Mr. Miko's point, I think it's a valuable point with regard to, and also to Mr. Rossignol's point, which talks about the pigeonholing us somewhere. I think rather than 7 a.m., and I did get that information from the survey, it should be an hour and 55 minutes before school starts, right? Because if we have a late a delay, we would want the custodians to have an opportunity, and other city personnel, an opportunity to remove snow or to make a safe environment for these kids to arrive at the schools and for their parents to bring them to the schools or their caregivers. And I do agree with Ms. Carpenter in regard to the paragraph. It should be in paragraph 8.2, and would second her motion to amend.
All right, what are you three talking about over there?
I'm just trying to get clarification on the amendment. So we're not putting it in the previous section, we're putting this in 8.2.
So 4.2 would be left as it is with that earlier vote, time of release to 6:30. Now we're looking at 8.2. And the motion would still be 7 o'clock. That's the motion on the floor. Did you want to pull that back, Mr. Hockman?
Yes, I don't know if I'm able to amend my own motion, but I would withdraw it and make a motion that the paragraph 8.2 be amended to include before school program starting 1 hour and 55 minutes prior to the start of school on any particular day up to the start of school.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, Mr. Hockman made, seconded by Mrs. Carpenter. On the motion, Mr. Rossignol.
Thank you, through the chair. Would you be amenable just taking the word optional out of that? So it doesn't give us a hard, fast time. It doesn't pigeonhole any potential vendors. Just by taking the word optional out of 8.2, service subject to negotiation, and we can work out the details strictly with the vendor.
I think we're at the point now where before school programming does not look optional. It looks like it's going to be part of this RFP. Absolutely. Yes, I would further amend paragraph 8.2 to remove the word optional from the heading, and to go beyond that, I would amend the first sentence and remove may consider to shall consider.
And I'll continue
give-
with my second.
Okay, just give me a moment. Okay, I believe let me make sure I have it correct here. We were taking out the word optional out of the headline. We would be starting 1 hour and 55 minutes prior to the start of school. In the first sentence, we changed the may to shall, and then also would be in the second sentence, which starts with contractor, we would change that from may to shall as well. And it's been seconded by Mrs. Carpenter. Roll call vote, please.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Any other proposed changes or alterations, Mr. Hockman?
We'll see how much traction this one gets, but I would move to amend the invitation and the heading to for kindergarten to grade 5 students enrolled at Peabody Elementary Schools or residing within the city of Peabody, and also, I guess, amend any corresponding section that would limit enrollment to students that are enrolled in Peabody Public Schools.
You've heard the motion by Mr. Hockman. Do I have any seconds?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Amico. Comments, Mr. Rossignol?
Thank you. I will not be voting in favor of this motion strictly because it will go against our own current right now, policies and procedures that we have in place. Whether those policies and procedures change down the road, that is up to debate, but currently that kind of contradicts what we currently have as policies and procedures.
Okay. Any further comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hawkins?
Yes.
No.
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 Okay. Any other requested changes, amendments, alterations to the existing language? Okay. Dr. Levine?
Just a point of information. The last time we were together, you guys made a number of changes to the RFP. I asked you to send me those changes by email over the last few weeks. If those changes were water, I would have died of thirst. So Kara has taken all this stuff down, and I assume that I'm going to get it right. But I will have this all to you over the next couple of days, and then I would guess that we would approve this at the next open meeting, Mr. Mayor. Okay?
Mr. Mertag, we can coordinate as well. I've taken down the language. I'm pretty comfortable, I think, with the changes that have been made. Do we want, in order to move the process along, though, would the committee be comfortable, Kara and I make those changes, and then we released it? Because we're not meeting in for another 2 weeks.
Yeah, through the chair. There are some things that I have to research, though, for this committee around issues of what Paso Cervantes age group services, and I suppose I could do that and fill that in as well without having to meet. I think the direction of the committee was that you wanted to know what grade levels Paso Cervantes serviced after school and before school. And I can take care of that tomorrow as well. And if they don't service the whole school, you want the South School in the language of the RFP, okay? As well as the West.
Okay.
And I think that's the only hanging chat, is that right?
Mrs. Dunn? Mrs. Dunn might have some hanging chats.
Okay.
No, it's just in fairness to Mr. Doucette. I picked up on something he had said a few minutes ago when we were talking and broadening the scope of the RFP to include the before school. And I got the impression there may be a lot more that we do not know about changes that may need to go into the RFP as far as making sure that it's completely accurate. So I think that all of you are going to end up working together because the focus actually has changed. And as we all know, a contract by committee is always in jeopardy. So I think that I would just like to say I understand this may take some time, and we may have to wait to the next meeting just so that you can all make sure that this is completely accurate.
And I'm comfortable waiting to the next meeting. There are a few other things that are lingering, I think some research. So, maybe, if the committee's comfortable, then we can set up maybe an aggressive schedule thereafter. Maybe just waiting to make sure we have this correct. I want to make sure we have it correct. So I'm comfortable. I can work with Ms. Mertag and Dr. Levine to make sure the language is set to present for a final vote on March 22nd. Mr. Rossignol, one comment on that?
With us waiting the extra 2 weeks and us voting on it on the 22nd, and then you have 4 weeks for it to go out to bid, now we're talking about basically the end of April. Does that give enough time for providers, the end of April through September, to get staffing needs in place? Through you to Dr. Levine.
Through the chair. I believe it does. We're set for the summer, so I believe that does, yes.
And I think we can set up an aggressive schedule to bring people in even late April, early May to move things along. Great, all right. We will hold that till March 22nd to make sure we have the set language, and I want to thank the members of the Parent Advisory Board and other parents who are here today to speak at the meeting. Thank you for being here. Okay, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Levine. If there's no objection, there's another item that I would like to take out of order. We have a candidate for a very important school position that I would like to turn over to Dr. Levine. Kids have homework. Oh, of course, kids have homework to do. They got to get out of here. I want to thank the students for being here. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Mr. Mayor, should we take a 2-minute recess?
Okay, I'd like to resume the meeting. Thank you, committee members. I did want to, if there's no objection, go to item 9 under new business. School business manager candidate. For the introduction, he is here today, Jared Stanton. I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Levine for the introduction.
Thank you, Mayor. We had a very productive business managers interview committee. I would like to thank Mr. Amico, Mr. Olympio, Mr. Hockman. Who else was on that committee? Mr. Gingras, who's not here tonight, our finance director for the city, Miss Murtagh, who was on that committee, and Tim Healy, director of buildings and grounds. Who else was on that committee, John? David Jack. Oh, and David Jack, our interim business manager for the school department. And we interviewed 4 candidates from a pool of about 15 to 20 applicants, and spent a very interesting night hearing from 4 people from varied backgrounds. And we had a unanimous recommendation, which is unusual in this business. But we did have a unanimous recommendation, and our recommendation to this school committee and the mayor is sitting in the audience tonight in the name of Jared Stanton. I had the opportunity to call and speak to people that I have worked with in my long career as superintendents of schools, people that I respect and that I admire, people that Jared has worked with in his relatively non-veteran career. Jared, as you'll see, is a relatively young man. Of course, anybody is relatively young compared to me. And the folks that I spoke with had glorious things to say about Jared, particularly about his work ethic, his talent, and his skill, but more about his personal characteristics of honor and integrity, his ability to work with people, his team approach, his personality, people enjoying working with him, his ability to communicate with a wide variety of different personalities. I talked with a superintendent who has a reputation himself of being rather demanding and sometimes difficult to work with by his own admission, an extremely hard-driving and successful superintendent for many, many years. And he told me that this would be the best hire that Peabody has made in a long, long time. Of course, I reminded him that you just hired me. So I am very proud to represent the interview committee for business manager in unanimously recommending Jared Stanton to you for the business manager's job in Peabody, with the knowledge from many people with whom I have worked over my career who have highly recommended him to Peabody as an outstanding young man who will bring us many years of skill, talent, and the team approach that we're looking for here in our great community. So with that, I'd like to introduce Jared Stanton. Jared?
Jared, welcome. Jared, welcome, and please take a seat. Yeah. It's nice to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Great.
Thank you. I don't believe a word he said, but no.
Great. Want to see if any committee members have any comments or questions that they'd like to direct to either Dr. Levine, members of the committee, or to Jared. I'll open it up now. Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. Welcome, through the chair, Mr. Stanton. We have your resume before us, and I see that you are currently at Groton Dunstable.
Yes.
And if I'm reading it correctly, you have worked on 2 budgets?
Correct.
2 budgets. And one thing I was going to ask you is if you'd like to just tell us a little bit
Sure.
about yourself and the
Sure.
time at Groton Dunstable.
Sure.
And I'd also like to ask you if there's anything during those budget times or even at another place of employment where you've identified any type of cost-saving measures or anything extraordinary or just anything you'd like to share with us about the times that you've worked on budgets for schools.
Sure. I'll just start with a little bit about myself. So I didn't have the most normal path to this position. I actually started out at Verizon. I was a technician for a number of years, and then I was a lineman. So I was with Verizon for about 10 years. I retired from them at the age of 29. And I come from a family of educators, and my father had always been telling me about becoming a school business manager. You know, you're pretty good at math, you're pretty good with people, you should give it a try. So I looked into this MASBO program. I did a 1-year unpaid internship through Melrose. Speaking to that, sorry about that. So worked in Melrose for 1 year, just tried to be a sponge, trying to understand, just the way the school districts work. So after 1 year there, I worked in Wellesley for a year. I was the administrator for special projects. What they were doing that year was they were building a new high school. I was in charge of all of the FF&E, which is the furniture, fixtures, and equipment. After that, I went on to Whittier Tech, and I was the comptroller for Whittier Tech for 1 year. I worked with Mr. Jack at Whittier Tech for about 6 months and have kept a relationship with him ever since. And after Whittier Tech, for the past 3 years, I have been at Groton Dunstable as the Director of Business and Finance. So I've developed 2 full budgets, but I've actually worked on a number, starting with at Melrose, just figuring it out and observing how the budget process works. From there in Wellesley, when I was there, after about 4 months, the business manager at the time was placed on leave, and they needed somebody to help out with the budget. So I jumped right in with the intern at the time and really worked on my first budget. And then my next year at Whittier Tech, the business manager left after 6 months. Dave Jack came in, and I again jumped in and helped with the budget. So I've really developed about 4 of them, 2 solely on my own. And for your second question, actually, so I started July 19th of 2012 at Groton Dunstable. On my first day, I asked for a report to see how we ended the fiscal year 13. And I realized that they had overspent the budget by about $800,000 that previous year. So that was day 1. We ended up getting that deficit down to about 200. We had that money in E&D, which is excess and deficiency, or on the school side, it's free cash. The DOR took that out of our E&D account. But what happened is for FY14, the year that we were in, that left a deficit of over $1 million. So my first year in there, we had a successful override in one of our towns. We developed a successful budget for FY15, closed out FY14, so that was my first experience with day one as a business manager. So.
Well, that was a great answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rossignol?
Welcome.
Thank you.
Along those same lines, so you had $1 million deficit and you were successful in getting an override. Could you tell me some scenarios or some instances if the override wasn't approved, what measures you may have taken from that scenario?
Sure. Well, the first thing that we had to do was a complete team effort of central office. The first thing that we had to do is we had to cut some positions. And what we did is we tried to go as far away from the classroom as possible. And there was a number of support staff that were cut, some custodians, which always isn't the best thing to do. But at the time, we had to do that. We had to make up. We had to make up the deficit. We had no money left in our E&D account, which is the excess and deficiency. So we really had no choice. We froze the budget. We looked into all these different cost-saving measures, into shed loading through utilities. Working with the Groton Electric at the time. We applied for grant money through the state through extraordinary relief, and we were successful. I believe we got about $75,000. So we ended up at the end of the year being in a surplus because we were able to cut the number of positions, do some cost-saving measures, and we ended the year with them certifying our E&D at about $330,000.
Thank you. Through the chair, one more question. And your resume is great, and I like the experience that you've had as a business manager. One of the things that we're looking at instituting next year is a point-of-sale system for our food service. Do you have any workings with instituting a system like that?
I haven't had an experience instituting it, but when I was in Wellesley that first year, I worked with Chartwells, and we had NutriKids, which was a point-of-sale system. And I worked with the assistant business manager at the time and became very familiar with NutriKids. They actually have that at Groton Dunstable. It's very successful, and I work with my food service director with that. But I have no experience implementing it. But it's something I think that I could learn and bring to this district if needed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rossignol. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Stanton, Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair, Mr. Stanton, one of the things that we have is, a huge district. How do we compare with the other districts that you've worked in as far as being the business manager for Peabody?
So currently, Groton Dunstable, we have a general fund budget of just over $36.5 million, or just under actually. With grants and revolving accounts, it's about $40 million. So it's just about half the amount that we have here. But the thing about a large budget and a small budget is you're going to have the same things. You're going to have salary lines. You're going to have textbook lines. You're going to have utilities. They're just going to be larger in a larger district. So I'm comfortable, I think, with a larger budget, and I welcome it. I'm looking forward to the challenge.
Another question. When you went to Groton Dunstable, and you said your first day you found out about the deficit, how did that? How did you find out? Was it brought to your attention, or is it something that you were examining what you were coming into and found it?
They actually didn't have any idea. I asked them for just to run me a report, and they have Tyler Technologies, Infinite Visions, and I just asked them how'd we end last year? What are we projecting for, what's in our revolving accounts? What's gonna, our E&D gonna look like? And they actually ran a report, the first report for FY14, and I noticed that all of the salary lines were in the negative. So they had implemented they implemented Tyler Technologies in January of that previous year, and didn't really have the tutorials, the training that they had needed. And so I began to dig a little bit and asked for a report for the prior year, saw that they ended in deficit. So then we figured out that there was an error when they were doing the budget with salaries, and that there was a number of errors, but that was the big error. It was a public. I'm not so, and so yeah, I discovered it.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Stanton? Great. So I think we'd be looking for a couple of motions. One would be to hire Jared Stanton, who was unanimously recommended by the screening committee as chaired by the superintendent of schools, as our new business manager for the Peabody Public School District pending contract negotiations. That would be the first motion. The second motion that I'd be looking for is a motion to allow myself as mayor to enter into contract negotiations with business manager-elect Stanton for the purposes of agreeing to a contract to be brought back to the full committee for approval at the next scheduled school committee meeting. So those would be the two motions that I would like to move forward on today if the school committee is so inclined.
Mr. Mayor, I'd make a motion to engage or hire Mr. Stanton as the Peabody School Department Business Manager, subject to those negotiations.
Second.
Heard the motion by Mr. Hockman, seconded by Mr. Rosignol. Roll call vote, please.
Yes.
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 And the second motion to allow me to enter into contract negotiations.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion to authorize you as chairman of this committee to enter into negotiations with Mr. Stanton, who is now the business manager. Is he elect? We'll say it, yeah.
Second.
Thank you. You've heard the motion by Mr. Hockman, seconded by Mr. Rosignol. Roll call vote, please. Oh, I'm sorry. On the motion, Mrs. Carpenter.
Thank you. What is the projected or possible start date for Mr. Stanton?
Dr. Levine?
Through the mayor, I believe Mr. Stanton has a 90-day out, and he'll negotiate that as we move forward. I believe he's already begun to do that, and we have an agreement that Mr. Stanton will use some of his vacation days in transition with Mr. Jack as we get closer to his start date, which will be as close to July 1st as possible.
Thank you. I realize there's a motion on the floor about contract negotiations, and it was my intention that in order to expedite the process, especially with a unanimous vote from Mr. Stanton, that I was going to propose that we go into executive session at this time with the intention of returning to open session for contract negotiations.
That's a good thought, Mrs. Carpenter. I'm very comfortable doing that if Mr. Stanton is. I mean, I don't want to put him on the spot, but
I'm okay with that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a fine suggestion. How about we take a...
The other motion.
Mr. Hockman, would you mind?
I would withdraw my motion.
Why don't we take a brief break?
We
And
We need a second and a roll call.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mrs. Carpenter made the
Sorry.
motion
I will
to go into executive session, seconded by Mr. Hockman. All in favor? Why don't we do that? Thank you. Go into my office for a moment. Okay, I'd like to go back into regular session.
Motion to go back into regular session.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rossignol. You've heard his motion, seconded by Mr. Hockman. All in favor? Thank you. In executive session, we as a committee voted 5-1 to enter into a 3-year contract with Jared Stanton for the position of school business manager. The terms are for a salary of $125,000 in year 1, with a 2% raise in year 2 and a 2% raise in year 3, and all regular health benefits and everything as required for a full-time employee. And don't want to speak for Mr. Stanton, but you have accepted those terms.
Yes, once I talk to my wife, she makes all the decisions. Just
Oh, that's how it works in your house too?
Yeah.
Okay.
But yes.
Okay. So, but we would need a vote in open session to go forward and execute a contract under those terms as outlined.
Mr. Mayor, I'd make a motion to follow the recommendation of the school committee chair, the mayor, and enter into a 3-year contract with Mr. Stanton pursuant to the terms that you just described.
Second.
Thank you. You've heard the motion by Mr. Hockman, seconded by Mr. Rossignol. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hockman?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
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 Congratulations. Thank you. Yes, thank you. So that contract will commence on July 1st, 2016. We have David Jack serving as our interim until that time, and we certainly want Mr. Stan to be fair to his current employer and fulfill his duties with the budget season upon us. So that contract will take effect July 1st of 2016. Great. Thank you, Jared. Thank you.
One second.
Yes.
Through the chair, Mr. Stanton, I just want to say welcome, and my vote on your contract in no way reflects my opinion of you, your resume, or the talent I believe you may be bringing to our district.
Thank you. And I think now our superintendent said he's about to give the fastest superintendent's report in history. Is that true? Wait, actually, wait a minute. We missed one item. Mrs. Dunn, thank you, Jared. Thank you. Mrs. Dunn, we'll go back to continued business. Any updates on the MSBA Higgins project?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just notification to all that our regular monthly meeting will be scheduled for the 3rd Thursday of the month at 4 p.m. at the Kiley.
Thank you very much. Public participation. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come forward? The microphone is open. Amy, come on up, Amy. If you could please introduce yourself, Amy.
Hello, my name is Amy Bro. I live at 12 Winnegans Ave. I have 2 children in the Peabody School System. They're both in 1st grade and attend the South School. So I addressed this committee a year ago. I've been waiting a long time to address you this evening. Expressing some concerns that I have. Many, I feel, still are there. First being just that I felt like when I first started kind of looking into school committee, although I've been in public school for nearly 20 years, like, on the other side as a teacher, I was always more at school committee meetings like, you know, the teacher side of we need a contract and putting that side never really on the parent side. It's still impossible to find information. I still don't feel like agendas are ever posted. No one really knows. Like, I knew there was the meeting tonight beforehand because I've been at the meetings and heard you put that into place, but where do I find this information? Where is this posted? On the city website, on the school committee website, on your page of it, on the school's website? Like, you can't find this information. So how these parents knew tonight to come, I'm like shocked that they knew, because I wasn't able to find that outside of I was here and heard you put that as part of this. So I still feel like there's a lot of parents who feel like, how do you find out what's going on at the school committee meetings? I'm like, well, because I go, and I'm always plugging for like, and I'd love to see other people go. Like, I talk to parents at swim class, like, I see a kid doing homework, I'm like, oh, do you go to public school, like in Peabody? And then I just strike up conversations with anybody I can at the soccer field, at the baseball field, at the swim lessons, just trying to get like a what's going on. So in many of those conversations, issues that have come up, this one not so much on my radar, except that other people have kind of put it on there, that redistricting hasn't happened in a very long time, that there are definitely parents that are kind of feeling like some schools are more overpopulated than others, that they feel like the city and its population has very drastically changed over the course of this past decade. The number of students that we have that are ELL is significantly high in some buildings compared to other buildings, and then on top of that, those are the classrooms that also have the higher numbers. And they're already like an overtaxed kind of population that just requires a lot of extra needs on behalf of the teacher, and then she's got extra numbers on top of it compared to other teachers that have kind of far less of this mixed population and then have less students on top of it. They feel like that's kind of just been brought up periodically over the past decade, and the answer's kind of just, it's in subcommittee. It's like that lost space that doesn't exist anywhere, subcommittee. I still have great concerns regarding response to intervention. I feel like it's one of the areas that this city is just drastically missing. I don't understand how it's even identified. What are the methods of identifying students who are going to get RTI? I feel like there's this huge population of kids in this city that are just slipping through the cracks because they're that middle ground kid who's not low enough to get on an IEP and doesn't have a need to get on an IEP, but isn't performing well enough to, whether they had the teacher in the room or not, would still go. There are those kids that, with or without me in my room, would do just fine on any test I give them. There are those kids.
What are you basing this on? What information do you have that these students are not being attended? Like, who? I mean, where are you getting this information?
Parents that I speak to.
From parents you speak to at the swimming pool?
Yeah, that there are kids. I mean, there's
Have they reached out to us?
Pardon?
Have they reached out to us?
I keep trying. I keep
All right,
saying
well, I mean,
that if we're concerned, if there are issues, then you have to speak. Like, someone has to go to committee meetings. I tried telling them that this is when they are. That
no, but I mean, you're making
on.
some pretty harsh statements here. And what evidence do you have of these statements to come here and say those?
That I've talked to parents that feel that their kids are
Give me a name. I'd be happy to call them myself and speak to them. But for you to come up here and say that we're not attending to students that are at the lower levels or that are in mixed classes, I don't even know what you're referring to in terms of mixed classes. But you can't just come up here and say those type of things without giving us some real evidence of that. Provide some evidence of that. I'd be happy to go and talk to people and have them come here and say something like that. You know, I don't care about you coming and speaking for yourself about your experiences, but don't come in and say you talk to somebody, you talk to parents, and there's groups of people, large number of students that are not being attended to.
Okay. Fair. Just this is kind of what I'm hearing, and equally these are my thoughts in here. That just, I have watched kids on my own street that felt like it took a long time before interventions were happening. That kids who are kind of reading in this middle ground, that at the building level, can't possibly be enough intervention teachers to meet the needs of the number of kids in the building.
And what students are you talking about? What numbers are you talking about? What are you basing this information on?
Okay, so in the South School, as far as I know, there is one reading intervention teacher that services that entire building. I cannot imagine that one reading intervention teacher can service the number of children in that building that are reading on a struggling level or a kind of at-risk level is what it's called. The kids are categorized as either being kind of an at-risk, a low risk, or a no risk. And these kids that are kind of in this middle ground of some risk and follow this kind of path of, with a little bit of guidance and help, and sometimes it's a short intervention, it could be 4 to 6 weeks. They just needed that bump of a phonics or something that puts them right where they need to be going and on that path. Some kids might get interventions that last extensively, but these kids that kind of read in this line where with the little bit of help that they need are heading the right way, or without that support are going to start slipping as we get higher in the grade levels. So I do feel like I can't imagine that in that building, with the number of kids in that building, that one intervention teacher can possibly service the number of kids that could potentially be reading at this some risk level. I'll move on. I commend the effort that this committee put forth on behalf of not only this district, but this state and every child in this state as far as your fight and pushback against PARC and DESE on that. However, I do feel like you recently did miss an opportunity on a big vote to implement part of it this year. I agree, PARC in itself is a whole another game. You've spent more than enough time discussing it. But it was an opportunity when clearly the writing is on the wall that no, PARC isn't going to happen anymore. But MCAS is also not going to be happening much longer either. There's going to be a new version, and it's going to be a version that combines, and it's going to take the MCAS that's here and the PARC that's here, and it's going to maybe meet those in the middle. But the reality is that you have now been practicing, and you're now another year of practicing a test that's down here. And in a couple of years, you are going to have to take the one that's somewhere in the middle here. And here was an opportunity to practice it. Give them a shot. No harm, no foul. It wasn't going to hurt us. I agree that your fight was well fought, and I am so proud of how hard you fought. And I would go back to my own school and be like, oh, this is what they said last night. Like, I'm so proud of them. Like, here's a district that does have moments of greatness, I see. But I feel like then somewhere you had to say, okay, in the interest of we're making decisions for the kids that are in our district right now, we have fought this battle and won to some level, but we're not winning beyond this. So let's do what's right for the kids. I feel like there are some other areas where, or a great concern of mine is the data that the district is using. I feel like there's pieces of it that are out of date. So for example, kind of going back to like that idea of RTI, how are kids identified for it? Typically, kids are dibbled. It's called DIBBLES. It's a dynamic indicator of basic early literacy skills. It essentially measures how much a child reads per minute accurately. Typically, that is administered in the beginning of the school year, and that data kind of decides who are those kids in that middle ground that kind of need that intervention. My concern is that the numbers that the district is currently using are substantially below what are the current benchmark levels. Levels that have been put in place for multiple years and have been really widely accepted at least 3 to 5 years in districts. So I'll give you an example. Currently, this district is using the number for the end of first grade. So the child reading at the end of first grade is on level, reading 40 words or more per minute. But most districts surrounding us, using the current levels, that same child in a district right next door is being required to read 69 words per minute. That's a drastic change. That kid reading 40 words, who in this district is seen as being on level and at grade level, if they transfer next town over in the next year, is going to be identified as a kid who's not only not on level, but in the lowest of levels. They're one word into that higher level. That grid goes from 0 to 39, from 39, well, 40. So they would be one word into that next level. And in most districts, a kid that's one word over would be a huge red flag as not only are they a kid that needs intervention, but a kid who really needs to be getting intervention because they're so close to slipping into that severe category. I still have a concern in regards to the leadership of the district. I feel like I still don't understand, like, who's guiding the teachers? If there's no director of reading, if there's no director of math, who's giving the directive to say that the expectation is that in every fourth grade classroom, this is the expectation of what we expect to see across the board occurring during the ELA block? Then I worry, is the education adequate and equal in every single classroom, or is it kind of hit or miss depending on who you get, or who is more forefront, or who's just kind of like, I'm just going to stick with the book because this is the only guidance I have, and I'm just going to go page by page by page? Or is there somebody who's kind of like, well, this works, these are the standards I have to teach, this book works for these standards, but I'm going to pull from this and this and this for these? Like, I just don't know how our teachers have a clear directive, or where, I don't understand where that directive is coming from if there's really no, like, upper structure to that leadership. And then my last issue is regarding the superintendent's position. And this is in no way a reflection on how I feel like you are doing your job personally, just in overall level, so please take this with a grain of salt. I will say at least I feel confused as to why the decision was made to let go a superintendent, hire an interim superintendent, spend a year that we were paying both positions, and then this committee sent in a request to the Commissioner of Education, dated August 7th of 2015, requesting a waiver because there's a critical shortage of superintendents. Yet when I looked up the job posting for that job, the posting was listed as an interim superintendent job. It wasn't listed as a superintendent's job. It was listed as an interim superintendent job, which to me feels like that kind of cuts out a large part of the pool of candidates, because many highly qualified candidates aren't going to apply for interim jobs. They're looking for something that's long-term. That request was accepted by the Department of Ed, and it was approved for 1 year, July 1st of 2015 to July of 2016. I believe I understood at a school committee meeting a few weeks ago that we extended this contract through and including the 2016-2017 school year. Then I guess I either missed where we posted for this job for 2016 and 17, or when we interviewed for this job, and when did we reapply for yet another waiver for this position, because that position waiver was only good until July of this year. So I'm left kind of wondering, how do we know there are no viable candidates again, and that this shortage has extended if we extended the contract to him multiple weeks ago? I understand that we do have other sessions that occur outside of these, so maybe this is stuff that we just missed, and then this is where people are then just kind of left not understanding what's going on, or questioning, or left wondering, where are we going? So I guess I'm left feeling like the district is stagnant. I feel like, yes, there is leadership. I agree that this leadership has an immense amount of background knowledge that you bring to the table. But my concern is that it's not permanent leadership. And when is a permanent solution coming for this district that will guide where we are going on a longer path that I don't feel like is maybe being looked at right now because we don't have this permanent solution, so we're kind of, I feel like, hovering or staying kind of still and not really moving forward. And I don't think that that's to say, like, you're not doing your job. I do believe you're doing your job and you do it well and you bring a lot to the table, but you are retired. So, I mean, like, this can't be a permanent solution, and I get that. So I guess I'm just kind of left feeling and wondering, like, where's the permanent solution coming, or when? And this is the conversations that I am having, or people are having, or people are wondering about or questioning, and because then you can't find information. This is, like, I guess maybe it connects back to my first idea of, like, nothing's out there and nothing's posted. So this is how conversations unfortunately happen, is kind of like at the schoolyard, at the pickups, at the drop-offs, on the stands, waiting at the soccer field, because we're all left going, like, what do you know about this? I don't know, or this is what I heard about that, or I don't know, this is what I heard from so, like, because we can't find the information anywhere. So maybe it all brings back to my point one. Like, we're trying. I think that there are parents that are trying to find out what's going on, and that combination of time and being a parent and working and all those things, and all of our lives are just 2 seconds here and there on the fly. And when you try to go to a website and you're perusing around for 5 or 10 minutes and you still haven't found what you need, and then you just kind of like, ugh, and you close it and go to the next thing because someone's calling for this and someone needs help for that and someone's got to be picked up. So I don't know. This is it. I'm still a year later feeling like I've faithfully committed myself to this district because I'm not going anywhere, because I am a Peabody resident. My kids are going to public school because I am a public school teacher and I believe in public education. But I have a long road ahead of me with this district because we're only in first grade. So I guess I just keep coming and voicing what I'm feeling or what I'm thinking in hopes that eventually I'm going to hear the conversations at these meetings addressing some of these concerns.
Thank you. I will say that I let you speak a long time. There's requirement of 5 minutes per person. I wanted to give you the courtesy of speaking. I strongly challenge many of the statements you have made. To consider us stagnant to me is just an incorrect statement, and a statement that I find very demeaning. I will tell you, and I'm sure you know this being an educator, that we're graded and we receive our rankings every year on a 1 through 4 basis. This year, we had we improved in our Higgins Middle School. We went up from a 3 to a 2. In 2 elementary schools, we went up from a 3 to a 2, and we had one of our elementary schools be a 1. So that means our West School is a 1. All of our elementary schools are now 2s, so there's improvement there. And our Higgins Middle School went up to a level 3 school. To me, that's not being stagnant, and to me, that is why I was very comfortable and, in fact, enthusiastic about moving forward with Dr. Herb Levine as our superintendent. That was discussed in open session. It was announced that we were extending him for an additional year. I would make that vote again. And I feel that we have excellent leadership that is moving the district forward. We are opening up a brand new state-of-the-art $92 million middle school that this school committee has supported to move our district forward, to get away from being a stagnant city in terms of education, and that is happening. We have invested significant money in the upgrades of our school buildings. Most notably right now, we have new windows and a new roof at the McCarthy School. And we have significant, over the last 3-4 years, made significant improvements to other school buildings. We're going to be doing a major renovation to the high school next year. I believe the school committee has stepped up, and the leadership has stepped up to make sure that those improvements are made for our children moving forward. We're investing in technology, we're investing in science, And I believe we're making some significant strides, and it was evidenced by the fact that we had 3 of our schools improve from level 3 schools to level 2 schools. Very proud about that, and very proud that Superintendent Levine is leading this district. Thank you for your comments. Mrs. Burrow, thank you. And I hope you continue to come to future meetings. Value your opinion. I just strongly disagree. Anybody else that would like to come forward and speak? The microphone is open. Now we're going to turn it over to the superintendent's report. Dr. Levine.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of comments. I've chosen actually not to reapply for a critical shortage waiver, so that would answer one of your questions. As far as redistricting, there's an active committee chaired by Mr. Hockman that will be meeting again in the spring or summer to talk about redistricting. One thing about to clarify about redistricting, people talk a lot about overcrowded schools. We have bigger schools than others. The Brown and the Carroll, for example, are newer schools, and they hold more kids. But I go over with the mayor and the school committee often class sizes. They get class size reports on a regular basis. And our class size averages in each of the schools in the elementary schools are very good. They're in the anywhere from 19 to 22. Even on this side of the city, you know, we know that we have low class sizes on the west and mostly at the Burke, but even on this side of the city, the Carroll, the Brown, and the Welch, some of the areas where you might have a concern, our class sizes are very good at the lower elementary grades particularly. So we watch that very carefully, and this school committee has invested wisely in teachers. Whenever class sizes rise to a level where they're uncomfortable, they have invested in another teacher so that we can split those classes so they don't become unwieldy. We watch that all the time. As far as another comment that you made about ELL, and we do have pockets of places where we have more second language learners than others. The research is clear that if you combine your efforts in 1 or 2 places where you have teachers and specialists in 1 or 2 schools teaching these kids together, that your efforts oftentimes bring better results, because you have more adults being able to reach more kids with those special skills and instead of spreading them out through the district. It's also important to state that that's where our people happen to move. So they want to go to school in the places that are closest to their homes. We try to accommodate that. So it's true that in some cases we have demographics that are compressed with kids who need help in second language learning, but that's where they live. So that's where we try to teach them. I think this school committee, as the mayor has eloquently said, has made tremendous investments in our schools, and we are moving forward with the help of a lot of people. The city council has made a great investment in our schools, and the community has made a great investment in our schools. And most importantly, we have tremendous teachers in our classrooms. We're very proud of that. Speaking of which, my report will speak to Donna Conley. You have in your packet a letter that recognizes that in the Brain Builders program, Donna Conley is being recognized for her excellence by the state of Massachusetts for her efforts in our coordinated family and community engagement program. And I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that tomorrow she will be recognized at the State House for her contributions to that program. I know of the excellence of that program because I know of it personally because my grandson Max goes to that program every Tuesday. And of course he comes down to my office and he says hello to his papa, but he's really much more interested in going down and playing with the trucks and in engaging with other kids that are in that program. What's interesting though is, and I think this is important, Donna and her staff, my grandson is highly allergic to peanuts and eggs. And Donna and her staff tailor whatever food is down there to the needs of Max, and they actually do some teaching around that. so that the adults and the kids in that program, when Max is there on Tuesdays, learn about Max's allergies. And I think that's a great statement about what we do in the Peabody Public Schools for our kids from the very earliest ages. So congratulations to Donna, and I want to thank her and her staff for the great efforts on behalf of our children. I also think it's very important for the school committee to hear that the efforts of Deb Murphy and kindergarten teachers has brought us certification from a very difficult group of people who oversee nationally all kindergarten classes throughout the state and throughout the country. The National Association for the Education of Young Children has certified for full-day kindergarten that our 3 remaining schools, the South, the Welch, and the Brown, meet the very strictest of guidelines for our kindergarten classes. And I wanted to bring that to your attention, and I want to congratulate Deb Murphy and our terrific kindergarten staff for their efforts on behalf of our children as well. Very proud of what they do. And on a more mundane basis, there are 3 field trips that you need to approve. They are all overnight trips. 2 are going out in March, and 1 is going out in April. I would ask for your approval on separate votes, please. 1 is for the track team going to, actually a select number of track team members going to the Armory in New York, March 10th and 11th. I would ask for a vote to approve that trip, please.
Motion to follow recommendation of the superintendent regarding the field trip.
Second.
Thank you. You've heard the motion by Mrs. Carpenter, seconded by Mrs. Dunn. Roll call vote. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Hockman.
Yeah, I apologize. It's been a long meeting and a long night, but I don't believe we need this vote. I don't think we had a first reading on the change of a policy. We never had the second reading of the change of the policy. I think the policy, as it still exists, that gives Dr. Levine the authority to do this. If we want to take so we do need a second reading on that policy in order for it to change under our bylaws. If Dr. Levine wishes for the vote to take place, I wouldn't stop it, but I don't think we need it.
Mrs. Dunn?
Actually, Mr. Chairman, there was a vote taken to dispense with the second reading of the revocation of the original field trip policy, so I believe that right now the policy is that the school committee must take a vote on these.
I don't want to belabor this. I think the vote was to suspend our rules in order to take that vote because of the urgency of that trip to Italy. I'm not going to prevent the vote from taking place. I just think we need a second reading on the policy.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hockman. We have the motion in front of us. Roll call vote.
Mr. Hockman?
Abstain.
Yes.
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 Thank you, and through the mayor. I would like a vote to approve the DECA trip to the Boston Sheraton overnight, March 10th to the 13th, to compete in the International DECA competition.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Rossignol, seconded by Mrs. Dunn. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hockman?
Abstain.
Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes.
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 Thank you. Through the mayor, I would like a vote to approve the lacrosse trip to the University of Massachusetts to participate in competition and other events April 22nd and 23rd.
Follow the recommendation of the superintendent.
Second.
Heard the motion by Mr. Rossignol, seconded by Mrs. Carpenter. Roll call vote.
Mr. Hockman?
Abstain.
Mr. Rosenthal?
Yes.
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 I am through with my superintendent's report, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dr. Levine. We do not have any written communications today. Mrs. Dunn,
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to ask, Dr. Levine, would you send a letter on our behalf? I'll put it to a vote. I'd like to make a motion that a letter be sent to Ms. Deb Murphy and the staff of our preschools and kindergarten classes, congratulating them on having all of those classes under the, excuse me, the NIAC qualifications. It is a very lengthy process, and to have all those programs certified is a true feather in the district's cap and theirs as well.
Second.
All in favor? It's a vote. Thank you. Subcommittee reports. Education Subcommittee, Mr. Hockman?
Nothing to report at this time.
Thank you. Finance, Mrs. Carpenter?
We are in active negotiations with multiple units.
Thank you. School Safety, Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. School Safety Committee has a meeting set for March 28th at 6 o'clock at the Kiley.
Thank you. Athletics and Wellness, Mr. Rosignol?
Thank you. Through the chair to the members. We will be having our first meeting on March 28th at 7 p.m. at the Kiley School Building. Topics to be discussed would be field maintenance issues, gate receipts, under athletics, and under wellness, the health center at the high school.
Thank you. Quality and Standards, Mrs. Dunn?
Nothing tonight.
Liaison to City Council and Advisory Boards, Mrs. Dunn?
Awaiting scheduling on the joint meeting with the City Council Liaison Subcommittee, and the Parent Advisory Board meeting will take place Monday, March 21st, a place to be determined, and we're hoping to have a very special speaker.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Nothing to report on Building and Grounds. Under new business, we do have an additional item, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Mrs. Dunn, for discussion regarding resolution calling for full funding of education budget. Mrs. Dunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As all of you know, in your packet, I have included a copy of a resolution which is being put forward by many of the school committees in the state. This is to bring to the attention of the legislature and to the governor the fact that the foundation budget is inadequate for our schools. We have really had to fight for every dollar that we get from the state, and they continue to put numerous unfunded mandates onto the schools, but they have really and truly changed the way that they're accounting on the schools, and the money that our citizens pay in taxes are not coming back to the communities the way they should. This is for our Chapter 70 funding, and just to give you some examples, in Peabody Public Schools, the foundation budget is showing us as paying the required minimum of $5,904,666 on employee benefits and fixed charges, when the actual amount from the general fund should be $15,274,501. Our pupil services have been unfunded by the state by $654,238 in FY14. Other teaching services have been underfunded by $2,153,457. And instructional materials and technology. This is one we've spoken with quite often, especially recently. We have been underfunded by $2,413,235 in FY14 under the very foundation formula that the state says we have to follow. Those unfunded and underfunded amounts end up coming back out of the city's funds. It comes out of our property taxes as opposed to coming from the state. And what this resolution is to do is to ask that the legislature follow the recommendations of, the Foundation Budget Review Commission. These figures are from the commission, and actually the specific ones from Peabody, I want to thank Tracy Novak for providing those from MASC. This is a real problem for everyone, because in order to adequately fund education, the formula needs to be applied properly, and it needs to be adjusted. And a commission was formed and did the investigations and has come out with the fact that something we all knew, but the state is underfunding education. It's required in our Constitution. We've had numerous lawsuits. The Hancock lawsuit was the most recent one, and it still continues to prove that there's a lot of lip service up at the state. They need to understand that if they're going to require specific things from education, it's going to cost money and they need to pay for it. That is our money at the state level. It needs to come back to the communities under the formula that works to provide equitable education across the board throughout the state of Massachusetts. It's very, very different in every community. We know that. We've heard that time and time again that, you know, your zip code should not determine what type of education you get. Well, it does. And it gets reinforced by the way the state doles that money out. So the citizens of Peabody are paying a lot more money towards education when it should be coming back to us from the state of Massachusetts. So that's why I come to you tonight to make a motion for the resolution, and if you could bear with me, I'd like to read it into the record. Whereas the Massachusetts Foundation Budget Review Commission identified areas where the Massachusetts Foundation budget significantly understates the true cost of educating students in the Commonwealth and has failed to keep pace with rising costs. Whereas this underfunding means the cost of providing a quality education has increasingly been borne by local communities, most often at the expense of other vital municipal operations. Whereas investing in education today leads to higher incomes and thus less investment in police, prisons, subsidized health care, low-income housing, welfare, etc. in the future. Whereas state and local economies are most effectively strengthened by investing in education and increasing the number of well-educated workers. Therefore, be it resolved that the Peabody School Committee calls on the Massachusetts Legislature and the Governor of Massachusetts to fully fund and adopt the recommendations of the Foundation Budget Review Commission in the immediate future. So moved.
Second.
You've heard the motion by Mrs. Dunn, seconded by Mr. Rossignol. Any comments? Mr. Hockman.
Thank you. Through you to Ms. Dunn. Ms. Dunn, thank you for putting this together. Have you had an opportunity to speak with any of the Peabody delegation regarding this resolution?
No, I have not. But for the record, I did hear that Mr. Walsh, our new state representative, will be sworn in tomorrow. And I already gave him advance notice that I hope that this will be coming his way tomorrow so he can pick it up and take it with him to Boston and get busy. And I have not spoken with Representative Spiliotis yet or with Senator Lovely because as a member of a committee, I needed to wait for a vote from the committee.
Mrs. Carpenter, did you have a comment?
Thank you through the chair. Mrs. Dunn, I appreciate your work on this, and I just want to say I have always just been that whole formula. It never made any sense, and no matter how many times I asked, the answers still never made any sense. So I appreciate your work, and I will be in support of this.
Thank you, Mr. Amico.
Through the chair, thank you, Mrs. Dunn, for your work on this. In your research, did you also look into the way the state looks at our students who are lower income and now economically disadvantaged? Because in other communities, and I'm sure in this community, we're going to take a hit on that. Where we were getting X amount of dollars per student, they may look at a student now and say, well, that student doesn't fall under those guidelines, and we're going to get cut on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn.
Through the chair to Mr. Amico. Yes, I did look at that, and I did not bring in the figures tonight because it is very, very worrisome. This resolution deals specifically with the Foundation Budget Review Commission. Their findings and their decision were made just around the same time that the federal government changed the classifications of low income and I believe I think it's all low income, special education, ELL, every one of the categories, they've changed it. We know it's going to impact us. So that in itself is already a cut to the budget, probably a huge cut in this district. And then you have this on top of it. It's like two tracks just heading straight for us on cuts to the money and the funding that we need for education. So unfortunately, I don't have those figures because it didn't work with this, but I will get them for you because it's going to be big.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the table or in front of us. A roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hockman?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Mrs. Dunn?
And with the committee's permission, I'd like to prepare a letter and send this off to our delegation so that they can take action on this, and then they will be prepared to speak on it at the State House.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. We're at the end of the agenda. Items for the next agenda will be handled in the regular course of business. Thank you for a good meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.